Hello there, I'm Tommy, welcome to Blitz Transmissions, and today's video is just going to kind of be a little bit of a discussion topic on a question that was raised to me from a good friend of the channel, FigFury79. Make sure to go check him out on Instagram, as well as a YouTube channel that he does have, and he's also a co-host of Monday Night Figure Ball, so make sure to go check out the Monday Night Figure Ball show. The question that Fig posed to me was, hey, what's changed for you as you've been collecting Star Wars in your adult life? I have, for reference, 5 years. I got some skin in the game with collecting Star Wars in my adult life, and a lot's changed since I started, so I figured it'd be a fun little discussion topic to kind of talk about what has changed and how it's affected my collecting. It is really funny to kind of look back at, when I started collecting when I was a freshman in college back in 2019, because, I started getting into Star Wars collectibles, a lot of hype for Jedi Fallen Order, The Mandalorian, The Rise of Skywalker, all that kind of culminated into bringing me very deep into the throes of the Star Wars fandom again. My collection really started with the Funko Pops, and I think part of that was how readily available Funko Pops were everywhere you went. I know that Funko Pops were incredibly popular, pun intended, at the time, and you could find them pretty much anywhere. Walmart, Target, even like places, Barnes & Noble had a huge Funko Pop selection at the time, and it was just super easy to come by a bunch of Funko Pops. So that was kind of what sparked my adult collecting. I had a ton of them in my dorm room in college, and I think I had upwards of one point of about 150, between 150 and 200, and obviously I have since sold almost the entirety of that collection, but that was how things started. And it's kind of interesting because something that's definitely changed for me over the course of these 5 years has been, fatigue with certain lines. That's been a constant thing that's almost made me quit entire lines that I've been heavily into because, something better comes along. And, I will say that the grass always seems greener on the other side. When there's a line that you don't collect, you're like, oh man, this looks great, that looks great, all I see is the good. And then you kind of realize, like, oh, this group of collectors has a different set of problems that they're very vocal about versus, the line that I was just collecting. So I would say that's definitely some good advice in your adult collecting life, is to just kind of keep in mind that, while it may seem like, jumping ship on one line and going to another, I don't consider scale that same way. I have several friends, namely like 212 Hunter and Skywalker Hendrix. They both have jumped ship on the 6-inch stuff and really focused a lot more on the 1/6 scale stuff like Hot Toys. I don't consider that the same because then you're jumping from one scale to another. However, it still is. I know that those guys, they were Black Series collectors at one point and then they jumped ship and now they're doing something else. And they'll tell me all the time there's a whole different set of issues that other communities have with collecting. All of that to say, I collected Funko Pops for the first close to 2 years that I was into, Star Wars collecting, and I kind of jumped ship on it. I was collecting Black Series very lightly at the time that I was collecting Funko Pops. My first Black Series figure was the number 59 Captain Rex. I got him for $23.99 on Amazon, and looking at how expensive he was for a long time after that, that was awesome that I got him so early on. He's one of my favorite characters ever. And then I picked up, like the Sith Trooper, and I kind of was sticking to like, just the Trooper characters, Stormtroopers, Clone Troopers, you name it. And then the Mandalorian came on and completely shattered that entire mindset. So, then I'm like, oh, well, I'll just do helmeted characters. And then the photo reels started to get a lot better, and I picked up, a Cara Dune and a Grief Karga and a Moff Gideon, and now I'm like, well, if I've got these guys, then I've got to get all the rest of the Mandalorian figures. And then it kind of spiraled into what you see behind me now, where I just have a huge collection of Black Series, and honestly, this replaced Funko Pops as my bread and butter, and I never looked back. I think now I have maybe 15 to 20 Funko Pops, and those are just my absolute favorites, like little sets of Funko Pops that I, put a lot of effort into accumulating to get the complete set, so I don't want to get rid of those because of the sentimental value they hold for me. So in conclusion, I will say one thing that's definitely changed for me is what I collect, what I'm focused on. I'm definitely a million times more focused on action figures, not even just, you know, the 6-inch scale with the Black Series anymore, but I'm definitely way more hyper-focused on the action figure side of the collecting as opposed to other stuff. I'll dabble in things like the helmets and, you know, the lightsabers and other things like that, maybe some model kits here and there, but for the most part, I really do enjoy the action figures. And something I've noticed that's definitely changed is I've dug my feet in more with one line like the Black Series, and then you kind of start to expand out to other lines, you know. So I remember I have a pretty sizable collection right now of the on-card vintage collection Clone Troopers. Those are at the 3.75-inch scale. I'm a kid that grew up with the prequel trilogy and the Clone Wars, both the Clone Wars shows. So for me, the Clone Troopers are essential to my Star Wars enjoyment, and they've always meant so much more to me than just what you see in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. You know, I grew up with these characters in the 2008 Clone Wars, most namely, and for me, it was, you know, has always been an essential part of, you know, my Star Wars fandom experience, to the point where, you know, I have a very obscure Clone Trooper is a, you know, mascot for the channel. And I remember at the time I started picking these up, you know, I wasn't really satisfied with, I felt like Black Series wasn't scratching that itch for me with Clone Troopers at the time. I feel like they're doing a really good job pumping out a lot of Clone Troopers, but, you know, Vintage Collection was getting out so many more Clone Troopers, whether it was ARC Trooper repaints, other Clone Troopers, so I started to branch out a little bit. And I will say that that's another thing that's definitely changed in these last 5 years for me, has been, you know, collecting other lines. I think a big reason and a big theme of this is, you know, I get fatigued with one line in a way, but rather than jump ship like I did with the Funko Pops, I start to just find other lines that will kind of scratch that itch for me. And a big one for me that, you know, I wanted to scratch the itch with was the vehicles and the ships. Obviously, with the 6-inch scale, there's only so much that I can do, and I still felt like even at the 3 3/4-inch scale that I couldn't really scratch that itch without taking up a ton of space. And as you know, as collectors, that's our biggest enemy. That's public enemy number one as a collector of any line, is the space, the real estate. It's very, very rare that you can just expand at the snap of your fingers the amount of space you have to display your stuff, and stuff ends up getting either sold or put into storage. So, you know, we as collectors are constantly looking for how to maximize the space that we have. So for me, what actually scratched that itch before what you can see behind me, which is the Jazzwares Micro Galaxy Squadron line, was Hasbro's Mission Fleet line, actually. Now, while the character interpretations were very cartoony, obviously those are kids' toys, the vehicles looked realistic enough, and even though they would sometimes come with some play features, they still looked cool enough and they were small enough that I could display a lot of them without taking up too much shelf space. And to this day, I really do enjoy the Mission Fleet line. I think it was a great line. I'm not sure if Hasbro's really doing much with it nowadays. They've definitely scaled back a lot with it. A lot of the stuff is showing up at Ollie's now and discount stores like that. But, you know, for what it was, I thought it was a really cool line. I'm looking at them right now. I got the Razor Crest, Moff Gideon's TIE Fighter, which the wings could fold and land. I had Bo-Katan's Gauntlet Fighter, Luke Skywalker's X-Wing. You know, I had some really cool ships, and it kind of scratched that itch for me. Then, you know, as on the other side of me here, you can see I have part of my Jazzwares Micro Galaxy Squadron collection, and this was exactly what I was looking for. Back in the 90s and the 2000s, there was a line very similar to this one. I don't remember if it was called Action Fleet or something close to that, but it was almost identical, if not very, very close in scale. I think the minifigures were actually 1-inch figures too. So, you know, a lot of those ships, you know, I did have some of those as a kid. So this was a lot of fun to dive into. Gave me a lot of nostalgia for the stuff I collected as a kid. And this line's great too, you know, especially as a secondary, because again, my bread and butter is Black Series. That's always going to be the thing I prioritize over everything else that I collect. However, you know, with Jazzwares, I think they're honestly, I could say confidently that the Micro Galaxy Squadron line line is the most underrated Star Wars line out there right now. The ships are super inexpensive, so I don't have to feel like I'm really cutting into my Black Series budget at all when I'm picking these up in the stores. I also don't pre-order these. That's something that's changed a lot for me. You know, I started into 2019 right before COVID really ramped up, and you know, because of that, you know, everything was a pre-order, and pre-orders were selling out super quick. So you kind of got into that. It was kind of FOMO in a way, but also, you know, you knew if you wanted stuff, you had to lock it down the second it went up for pre-order, or you were not going to have an easy time finding it at your brick and mortar stores. Or you had to wait for the eventual restock, which could take months. So, you know, I kind of got in that mode, and to this day with Black Series, I do just pre-order everything. You know, now it's because my work schedule is so ever-changing, and I'm constantly working overtime and stuff, so, you know, you don't know when you're going to have time to go figure hunting and things like that. But for Micro Galaxy Squadron, it's a fun little thing that whenever I'm at a Walmart or a Target, or like, you know, a secondhand store, I can just go look around, see what I can find. And I'm kind of leading into my next point here. You know, a big thing that changed for me were major life changes. Obviously, the volume of what I collect, it has grown exponentially, you know, with now I'm collecting different lines, and now I'm collecting, you know, things at a much more rapid rate. I'm pre-ordering almost everything that Black Series puts out now, and on top of that, I'm staying on top of it with Micro Galaxy Squadron. I have several Hot Toys on pre-order right now, you know, I'll get into that later, but a lot comes with that too. My budget has changed a lot because I'm no longer in college, you know, I have my career locked in right now, so for me, it's been a lot easier to dedicate funds to this hobby and to this passion that I have, and because of that, it's made it, you know, a lot easier. I don't have to think twice about picking up an action figure in the store like when I was in college, and you know, I'm thinking it's either I buy this new Black Series figure or I go and buy food for the week. So that's definitely been a big lifestyle change that has, you know, affected my collecting. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that some of my friends were moving away from the Black Series and jumping to other things. I will say that in a way that has happened for me too. Whereas in the past, I would have been satisfied with just a Black Series interpretation of a character, I have really started to fall into the slippery slope that is Hot Toys. When I was in college, I bought my first Hot Toy. It was the 501st Clone Trooper. I think I got whatever this, I don't know if it was the special edition. I think it was that, the one with the 332nd helmet and like the Z6 rotary cannon. That was my only one for a really long time. Then I started to branch out. I bought the Boba Fett with the throne. I started, you know, I bought Captain Rex, and then I'm like, oh, well, I'll just get all the 501st Hot Toys. And then I bought Grand Admiral Thrawn, and now, you know, I'm getting Captain Enoch and all of Thrawn's guys. And then Hot Toys has been absolutely knocking it out of the park this year with character selection. So I've got the new General Grievous coming, I've got the Darth Maul with the Sith Speeder coming, and it's just been a big change in my collecting. Again, part of that comes from budget, but also, again, you're looking at other lines and you're kind of seeing what other things have to offer, and it almost is that grass is always greener on the other side, which is why I just kind of dabble, you know, I dabble in things like that. I also dabble in SH Figuarts now, Mafex. Shout out to Mr. Coffee, also from Monday Night Figure Ball, for putting me on to this kind of stuff. And, you know, it's fun to get as like a one-off every now and again, to kind of break up the monotony of, again, my bread and butter, the stuff that I collect most heavily. This next one here, I will partially blame my dad for, because he was a huge Star Wars collector before I was even born, you know, with Phantom Menace and everything like that. And he has passed down to me huge chunks of his collection that have just been sitting in storage for 20 years. Like his Phantom Menace collection, which are all sealed. He gave me a ton of Power of the Force figures, which are all sealed. Specifically Power of the Force 2. I always have to clarify, it's Power of the Force 2. But yeah, he gave me all of those figures, and it's kind of made me have an affinity for the stuff that I grew up with and wanting to get that again in my adult collection. And recently, you know, a big thing that's changed my collecting as well is going to toy shows. I go to Toy Hio. I try to make it to every single time they put on that show, which is 3 times a year. Highly recommend checking out Toy Hio. It's an amazing show over in, I think it's the east side of Ohio. Definitely make sure to go check out that show if you're in that area. And again, we're going to ICC Con, and, you know, just, you know, I go to secondhand stores and I'm always looking at the older stuff and I'm eyeing it up more. And I think part of that is nostalgia, considering, you know, Phantom Menace turned 25 years old this year. Next year, Revenge of the Sith turns 20 years old. So we're kind of in this era of people my age who grew up with the prequels and the Clone Wars era are now having the adult money to buy those things. So a lot of the stuff that I would just gawk at in the figure catalogs as a kid, or, you know, the stuff I'd see window shopping at Toys R Us, are things that I'm actively looking for, wanting to pick up now. Whether that be, you know, the Saga collection, or, you know, the 30th anniversary, the coin characters I called them as a kid, the, you know, 2008 animated Clone Wars figure line. That there's so many different things, and I remember specific sets that I had as a kid that I'm again wanting to pick up now. And because of that, I've had to make way, you know, for other stuff. So I'm constantly rearranging things, trying to think of preemptively, okay, if I find this thing I'm looking for, where would I put it? And that's a lot of fun, honestly. And overall, you know, I think that my biggest two changes, obviously the volume, as I said, has increased of, you know, how much I collect, but I really would also say that my enjoyment of this hobby has increased more and more as I've been, you know, in the game longer. I love talking about this hobby. I love, you know, discussing this hobby, debating this hobby with people. I love when a new action figure gets revealed and everyone gets to, you know, share all their discourse, and we can go back and forth and argue about it or agree on it and, you know, get all excited about it. It's just a lot of fun to share that, especially with other people who are, you know, my age. It's very reassuring to the collecting community to see lots of people who are in their 20s and 30s getting into this hobby heavily, and, you know, not just getting into it, but talking about it on the internet. And I think for, you know, guys like my dad who have been in the game since the beginning are really appreciating seeing that there is a next generation, there is a future to the Star Wars collecting hobby. But yeah, so that's pretty much all I have to say on, you know, what's changed for me as a collector. I will say my enjoyment has increased, and that's been, you know, largely in part due to all of the different lines I'm collecting now, and, you know, kind of scratching all those itches that I want to scratch as a collector, and feeling like I have a very, it'll never be complete, but, you know, feeling like when I walk into the room, I get that satisfied feeling looking at the collection as a whole. So with that, guys, share with me in the comments below, you know, what has changed for you in your perspective of how you collect and what you collect. How are you feeling about a lot of the active lines that are going on right now, like the Black Series or Micro Galaxy Squadron? Let me know what you think. What is your preference when you collect? How often do you collect? And let's talk about it in the comments below. I'd love to have conversations with you. And if you'd like to continue those conversations more than just in this comment section, join my Discord. I have channels in my Discord for all the different toy lines and stuff. I'd love to get in touch and just yak it up with people in that Discord. Also, make sure to check out my other social media. Those links are in the description below. And if you're not subscribed yet to Blitz Transmissions, subscribe. I've got awesome Star Wars content coming out all the time. With that, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll catch you for the next one, and may the Force be with you.